Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mind Blown Zone, episode 36. This one is titled Normal versus Natural. How are you, Brad?
Never better as usual. And how about yourself?
Never better, Brad.
Awesome, Matt.
Just two guys who are never better than any other time.
That's the only way to be, if you think about it.
Certainly my preference.
Indeed.
Okay, shall I intro this?
Please do. It's going to be an interesting topic today.
Here we go. It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. A quote often attributed to Jiddu Krishnamurti. There seems to be a disempowering overlap of the concepts normal and natural. The most common behaviors in societies are often assumed to be natural without a second thought of what is truly natural, or in other words, what behaviors are integral to our nature. In this podcast, we explore what may be our truly natural behaviors in contrast to an unnatural set of behaviors that have become the norm in society. Upon investigation, it is quickly revealed that most normal behaviors are somewhat unnatural, leading us to inquire where did these normal yet unnatural behaviors come from, and how do we realign ourselves with that which is natural?
Excellent.
Okay, I'll tell you that was a mouthful.
Indeed, it was. It was good, though. Very good synopsis.
Okay, so I understand that you want to preface this discussion, Brad.
Yeah. So, what I want to make clear, try to make clear here, and I'll probably do it more often than just here in the opening, is to, I don't want people to misunderstand or misconstrue what we're trying to say here in this podcast. And that is to say that our natural behaviors really do we hold those closest to us, and they really are natural. They really are natural to us. But sometimes distinguishing between those behaviors versus what has come to seem normal is there's a little bit of difficulty in distinguishing between those, and we'll try to point at where you can tell the difference. But I want to make sure too that people don't think, well, I don't want to start behaving like a weirdo. I don't want to start dressing in all black or wearing weird makeup and tattoos or anything along these lines, or changing your personality or anything like that. None of those things are what we're driving at here today. It's more like almost, this layer of brainwashing and our responses, attitudes, and behaviors that result from it that I'm trying to point at here today. So it's about, if I can make it very clear, it's about what's coming from inside of you that really is where the misfiring is going on with this natural and normal. And we'll delve into that a little deeper here as we move along. But hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And I think you also wanted to clarify the quote from Krishnamurti.
Yeah, well, just quickly, the two things I want to clarify. First, it's there's no proof that Krishnamurti said those exact words. It's kind of like the Mark Twain quote about fooling people and not being fooled. But he said similar things to it, and many other, we'll say, metaphysical and spiritual gurus have said something similar. So the essence of it is accurate. But the point is that what he's describing, I think, is looking at it from he's looking at the normal behaviors that you see, on TV and in the movies and out in society. Don't They don't conform to a more metaphysical or spiritual outlook on life, and the more you see it from that point of view, the more obvious it becomes, right? And if you don't see it all from that point of view, then everything passes as quote unquote normal. And also, just to make clear that he's not talking about sick as in people with major psychological disorders that literally can't function at all without supervision in society, right? That need to either need full-time supervision, or they need to be in a some sort of a psychological institution to be looked after. It's not talking about that level of psychological disorder. It's more it's what he's pointing to is that the behaviors that are passing for normal are actually working against you physically, mentally, and spiritually. So that's the idea behind the quote.
All right. Okie dokie. Okay, well, let's launch into the actual discussion here. I just want to begin with just a look at these terms, right? Normal and
Hmm.
natural, and kind of look at just the definitions and also the energies that are kind of like associated with those. Because I find that people will say things like, well, that's not normal. Can you please act normal? Like, as if like good, right? Well, stop doing that. That's not normal,
Right.
right? Could you just let's just be normal here, okay? And it's like normal, good, not normal, bad. You can immediately sense that there's that kind of energy behind the words,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And if you look
Exactly.
in statistics, like in mathematics and statistics, where they use the word normal there, is like there's the normal, right? Like the most commonly occurring. And that
Standard
seems like
deviation
yeah,
pops into
right?
my mind. Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah,
Sorry.
how many standard deviations away from the norm, right? And
Hmm.
there's no judgment in mathematics. The norm is it's not the good or the bad, it's just like the center,
Hmm.
right? And so the norm in society, if you go just by that definition, right? That kind of like unbiased, like non-judgmental, non-subjective idea there. The norm is just like what most commonly occurs. And it seems like for some reason we're looking out at what are the behaviors that most commonly occur, and we're going, then that's what most commonly occurs. The word normal is good. Those are normal. Let's be normal. And we're like energetically like stuck to the most commonly occurring behaviors. And we're all
Right.
agreeing, like, yep, let's agree that they're good and do those. But I think where this podcast is going to lead is a suggestion that that's not necessarily a good thing. What do you think about that, Brad?
Exactly. No, it's a great point. And yeah, you're pointing to, peer pressure, herd mentality, group approval, all are strong influences, right, on precisely what you're pointing to. Like to deviate from those feels like pressure you can do without, and that's why this is tricky, because by continuing to conform within this parameters of your peer group normal behavior pressure, it stunts your spiritual growth. And herein lies the rub, as they say. Yeah.
Yeah, I like I've heard Alan Watts say that a few times that herein lies the rub, you know? Herein lies the rub.
Yeah, and
It's a good one.
lies the rub. Yeah, yeah. He was a great teacher, by the way. But yeah, that's where we're at.
Maybe an
And
even better speaker.
right, he was good. But yeah, that's where we're at. And again, the thrust of this isn't to lose all your friends and piss everybody off around you and make your family angry or none of that. It's more like non-participatory actions and behaviors rather than doing something different per se. We'll kind of point to a
Hmm.
few examples later on, but that's the idea. And once you see it, then it's hard to not see going forward. And the damage that it does isn't obvious on the outside. It's not obvious in the moment, but it comes later on, unfortunately. Anyway, it's a good point. Yeah,
Seems
there
like
is.
you're suggesting identifying natural and unnatural behaviors, learning to distinguish between the two, and then refraining from unnatural behaviors.
Right. And it's easier than you think to distinguish between the two. I think we'll talk about that here in a little bit. It's not as complicated as it sounds. Let's put it that way.
Hmm.
I think we get
And I
after it.
understand we're gonna you keep going, bro.
No, I was going to say, I think we'll get after that, answer that question here shortly.
Okay. Let me just pop into the some definition talk about natural then. So
Please.
natural, it's funny how we say this word natural. Like we say it at natural, even though it comes from nature. We don't say natural, and that kind of like obfuscates the word nature, right? It's kind
Right.
of doesn't necessarily even automatically occur that we're even talking about just an adjective pertaining to our nature, right? But when
Mm-hmm.
you say this word natural and natural, we're talking about, well, what behaviors are according according to our nature? And to answer that, you would have to actually ask, what is our nature? I mean, I understand that you're going to introduce something pretty interesting here, though. I would at least just mention what Ayn Rand said. Whoa, Matt's saying Ayn Rand. What a surprise! Um, but Ayn Rand said our nature was to be rational,
Mm.
which I think is interesting.
Hmm.
To be rational, and she would say that rationality is about acting uh like in a logical way and a way that's geared toward the achievement of our happiness.
Right.
So, do you think there's crossover in that and what you would say, Brett?
Yeah, it's even simpler, right? Well, we could say it more simply. But she's pointing at it though exactly right. What's natural to you is what feels good
Yeah.
to you, right?
Yep.
So you can even hurdle past the mind and the reasoning and the intellect aspect of it, and you can tell when you're not acting naturally by the way you feel,
Right.
even though it passes for very, very normal in society. Make sense?
Yeah. She said that there's like a immediate good bad feedback with every thought and action. Like
Yeah,
anything that's wrong, you immediately feel bad.
exactly. That's the barometer. It's that simple. That's right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Good job, Ein. I agree with a lot of what you had to say.
One day we'll have to do a podcast just about Ayn Rand.
Indeed. That'll be all you, my friend.
All right. So how about you take this next part? Tell us a bit more about how it could be that unnatural behaviors came to be the cultural norm.
Yeah, well, it's a tricky discussion, and I'm only going to pick up in the 20th century. To speak to what went on before that is a whole different conversation. But I'll start it off with a man by the name of Edward Bernays, otherwise known as Sigmund Freud's nephew, who most people recognize as I mean, his literally his the most popular book is called Propaganda, about public relations, and that's how he's kind of framed as this guy. He's famous for making Dixie cups famous, and women smoking cigarettes, Virginia Slims, back in the 1920s, 1930s, and made it sexy for women to smoke. Just through some clever, advertising and marketing campaigns. So that's how he's known. He's like he's the founder of public relations, right? And he worked with all kinds of big corporations to help them with their PR. And of course, today, no big company can live without a PR department, right? But that's how he's remembered. But in reality, Bernays was working mostly for what today we would call our alphabet agencies. He was working for the government on all sorts of things, and it's most of it's secret, hidden. There is information about him working, with what was known as the ISS before the CIA, and the Department of War back then. It's now Defense Department, right? Everything's been obfuscated, like your natural word there. But he was involved with he and a group of other people, and I don't know if they all worked directly together. Some Germans or some Englishmen, Frenchmen. Somehow or another, around the time of 1900, the understanding of how the human mind worked coalesced, and these guys that were researching it from different angles all kind of came together with their research, and they basically figured out how to manipulate humans on a mass scale. And it from there comes all these other institutions which would follow. And I'll mention a few here. One, it's popular in the conspiracy theory realms called the Tavistock Institute. Another one, the Fabian Society, and their seal is great. If you've ever seen it before, it's literally a wolf coming out of a sheep's clothing. Basically, that's they literally are telling you with their official seal what they're up to, right? And then there's of course the Frankfurt School, which has had a tremendous influence, and that's basically that's where Marxist ideology comes in, and that's today we see that as all the the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, cultural Marxism, just pervading all our institutions now. That's it. It comes from these types of organizations. And this started to happen, at least in the United States. These Marxist people with Marxist ideology from Frankfurt, Fabian, came over to the United States, ended up at Columbia University, and just this was like in the early 1930s, and just kind of infected academia after that, and basically took over, sociology departments and psychology departments. And today, it's just crazy what comes through these people. But this is what passes. They pass off effectively what becomes normal, and they influence media and government. They're all working together to pass these ideas along. Of course, we've got CIA, and it's probably pretty well known for most people listening to this podcast that they have been involved in the American news media for at least 60 or 70 years, which is basically almost how long they've been around, after World War II. And they have, agents in all the editorial departments at all the big TVs and newspapers, and had that for a long time. There's even been a congressional hearing where they were asked about this. And, maybe at the top of this list of all these different organizations is what's known as the Royal Society in Britain. And they seem to be the top, what I'll call think tank, that is maybe responsible for passing off its research. And it does, major secret research on human behavior, psychology, influence, manipulation. And what they find out gets spread out to organizations like these and utilized. And it effectively becomes what gets passed off in our cultures, on television, the movies, and and universities and these types of places as normal behavior. Are you with me so far?
Sure am.
That's just kind of a brief list, but that's in terms of America and Britain, certainly, I would say this is all passes off to Australia. I don't know which organizations there officially hold some of these roles, but this is kind of how it happens. It's not, and it's always slow. It's never like immediate, and it comes on slow, and then when it becomes obvious, then it speeds up, and it's become obvious to a pretty large percentage of the population at this point. I wanted to mention a guy named Yuri Bezmenov, who pretty famous in the truther circles. He did an interview. He was an ex-KGB agent, defected to the United States or Canada back in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And G. Edward Griffin interviewed him for a couple hours. And if you don't know G. Edward Griffin, he wrote the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, which was all about, the Federal Reserve and what went on with that. Anyway, in the interview, there's some pretty salient points where Bezmenov is making it sound like it was a ploy by the Soviet Union to bring communism to America and infiltrate and destroy America from within. But that's kind of a misnomer. That's how certainly he would have seen it. But this is really a bigger thing that happens to all countries all around the world since the beginning of time. Is this infiltration and destruction of the nation? This is how it happens. And he used the term demoralization is the term that he used, but he's effectively saying that these avenues that I mentioned above are the institutions, the think tanks, the universities. They're the ones, the media outlets. These are the ones that spread the demoralization until it destroys the society. So that's the gist of how these behaviors come to look normal to us. And it's slow, it's insidious, but it happens. I mean, if you look at culture today versus 20 years ago, versus 20 years before, versus 20 years before, if you kind of look at things in 20-year increments, it's how people lived in, 1940 is almost unrecognizable to how they live in 2024. And it's just a whole different set of behaviors of what passes for normal, what passes for moral, what's okay, what's not okay. It's changed tremendously, in basically a 80-year time frame. And we'll continue to do so if we're left on this same path. So that was my talk off on how this spreads. Any questions?
I guess the question that would be, pertinent is, why would these people do this, Brad? What is with these groups? that they would want to
Well,
brainwash in that way, like tell us this nonsense, unnatural stuff.
that's a darn good question. I don't know if I'm going to go too deep into that here on this podcast, but suffice it to say that to allow society to become complacent goes against the natural order of why we're here. So making making life better and better and better for everybody goes against the very nature of this place we call life on earth. And so it's effectively a directive, if you will.
It's a pretty deep answer.
it, in short, what we require here is what we'll call catalyst and contrast to requirement. And if there's not enough catalyst or contrast, then people become lazy, as it were. And on the flip side, when there's too much catalyst and contrast, people become revolutionary. Right? We've certainly seen that happen again and again and again throughout history. Right? It doesn't really matter where you look. There's always no empire lasts for that long. Right? Maybe the Roman Empire is maybe known to last the longest, 1,000 years max. But most of them, I think, most countries topple within a 200-year time frame is typically about what it is, right? Plus or minus 100 years. And we can see the evidence of that today. And this is kind of the reason why. I don't know if that fully answers your question. You want to poke at it a little bit more? You want to keep moving forward?
No, I mean, I was mostly teasing you just to see how deeply you'd answer the question at this stage.
It's a tricky one. We'll talk about it certainly in a future podcast, but that's the idea. Is that you almost can't stop it from happening, right? To be angry about it, to be upset about it, it doesn't serve. You need to become aware of it first of all, which is kind of what we're trying to do here with this podcast. And with awareness grows some understanding, and then with that understanding, hopefully grows a movement back towards your natural behavior attitudes. That's the goal.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So our next section is to look at examples of normal yet unnatural behaviors.
Oh, you skipped right over my topper here. I want to do the
Which
belief
part?
shapers.
Oh, you want to
The
mention
bu-
I thought you were kind of going did that already. Okay, mention the belief shapers, and then we'll dig into the examples.
that's just a term that I made up. Well, what I'll say is that this group, for lack of a better expression, this group of entities sits above all those institutions and think tanks and universities and so forth that I mentioned. They're outside our awareness for all intents and purposes, but they effectively create the propaganda, if you will, the misinformation that they pass off, of course, is true and accurate and right, factual. And they're the ones who sit at the top of all of this and shape our beliefs. That's why I call them belief shapers, because they're responsible for what the masses believe, and therefore they have they are ultimately those who have taught us what passes for normal today. Questions about that?
No questions.
Right. The
Only
way
because
they
we've discussed it so much already. If I was hearing it for the first time, I'd have many questions. So
right
feel free to
how
add
to
anything.
yeah, I was just going to throw in the kind of the winning game plan formula for them is that they everything they teach us, they sell us, always comes with this sugar coating that it's going to be good for humanity, right?
Right.
In one way or another. They always are able to sell it to us because it's for the good of the greater good. That's the trick.
Mm.
And anyway, that's once you hear that, you can almost guarantee that there's something not right or nefarious about whatever follows a sentence like that.
Well,
So
it's always the secondary part of that that they always come with a certain flavor is that some people need to be sacrificed, right? So that's a pretty dark deception, right? They're always telling the masses that a certain smaller minority needs to be sacrificed for the good of humanity,
Right.
right? For whether it's the capitalists, right, or the well, it's usually the people who have what the masses want, or something like that, or it's usually the free thinkers, the individuals, the stronger people always need to be sacrificed for the good of the many.
That's right. Yep. The people that have not fully taken the brainwashing download are the ones who have to be sacrificed. That's
Right.
exactly right. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Good
Uh,
point.
I feel like hesitating, but Ayn Rand has a really good book called We the Living. Not many people know this one. Most people know The
Mm,
Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, but We the Living is set in Russia in like 1918 when the collectivists were spouting propaganda of like for our great collective, for the good of the many. It's pretty
right.
intense. Yeah,
Well, we're
it's a
getting the
good
same
book.
thing here in America and really in all the Western world about who the bad guys are. They've been running it strong for 10 years now.
Hmm.
Right? You and me, we're bad. We're the bad guys, by the way.
Right.
We're
Yeah,
the
it's like
wrong.
the people you need to get yeah, you need to get vaccinated for the good of the collective, right? And those anti-vaxxers, the people who want to think for themselves and just live their own life and not be involved with that,
There
they're
you go.
bad,
That's
right?
right.
And they need to be punished. Imagine,
That's right.
see that's why I say it's such a dark deception. So like if you're consuming that propaganda and you're taking on that deception and deceiving yourself into believing that's true, that certain people are like need to be punished and for not going along with the collective, woof, you're in a dark space
Yeah. And they're
there.
almost passed for completely normal during COVID, by the way. There were
Oh, it's the
just
new
enough
normal.
there were just enough people that knew something was wrong, even though they played along, right? They didn't like it. They played along
Mm.
though, right?
Seems
Yeah.
like that's part of the whole game to just let a small minority know that it's not right and to have this war between them or something.
They're always setting up wars, always creating separation. Another hallmark playbook move that they make. Always at least two groups, the good guys and the bad guys. And they'll let us
Right.
know who they are. Yeah, yeah, good points. All right, where are we moving next? The term.
Okay, so we mentioned things something like COVID or uh, you know communism or something like that. These are really obvious, like world. Everyone gets in and involves themselves in certain collective behaviors. But the actual ones you want to talk about are a bit of a different flavor, right? For example, the first couple you got mentioned here are fear and judgment. So why
Oh,
don't you lead into some of these, Brad?
did you jump past the other bullet again?
Yeah, I already covered that higher
Okay. Okay.
term
Okay.
normal.
Sorry.
So now we're down at examples of normal unnatural behaviors, and the first one being fear. You want to lead off into that?
I do. And I just want to make it clear that fear serves a purpose for a brief moment, right? For a moment in time. It's not something to be abhorred or something that you can avoid, right? Like if uh you're standing at the top of the Empire State Building and you look over the edge and you think about jumping, you have a sudden whiff of fear and go, well, if I do that, I'm going to die, right? So there's a purpose to what I'll call momentary fear. But I'm never talking about that, right? That's a natural thing. I'm talking about this ongoing mental machination, the monkey mind working in this anxiety, worry, concern, stress, guilt, all these categories of either fear of the future or fear about what happened in the past and the constant thinking about referring to and moving in that direction. This is, a lot of people, this passes as a very normal behavior. But I would suggest that it's extremely unnatural because it doesn't. And what did I say was the way you could tell whether it was natural or unnatural?
Whether it feels good or
That's
bad.
right. So you can see right off the bat when you think about and you feel anxious or worried or concerned or stressed or guilty, how do you feel when you're ruminating in those areas? You feel like crap, right? Feel
Hmm.
terrible. So that's the key indicator that you've fallen off the natural ranch and now you're in normal land. Now, if you ask your friends or talk to your, family or whatever about it, to them, they would tell you it's normal behavior, right? Yeah, yeah, I could see why you'd be anxious about this or worried about that. So they've also been indoctrinated into this unnatural
Yeah,
behavior.
I'd
So
react like that. I've known many people who react like that. So don't
that's right.
worry. That's perfectly normal.
This is the part where I say it gets a little uncomfortable for some people to think about this because they want to stay within the confines of their peer group or their family group or whatever. So they're willing to play along in that realm and do these things, these behaviors, these thoughts, these feelings that are working against them. Because literally all of those are thinking, really all of that anxiety, stress, worry, concern, all of that is thinking about a future you don't want. That's what it comes down to. Guilt
Right.
is thinking about something that happened in the past that you're unhappy about. And so you'd have to think, just if you just take a big giant step away from all of this for a moment and think, why would I ever sit and think about a future that I don't want? What advantage does that give me? Right? Like, I
Right.
mean,
I think
it,
people believe that they're kind of like, by thinking about it so much, they're like preparing for it, like mounting a defense against it, making sure they're going to be okay. But that's like a delusion as far as I can see.
well, yeah, I mean, you can think, all right, well, tomorrow, if I call off work for the seventh time this month, maybe my boss will fire me, right? Because I keep calling off sick. And there's a momentary helpful thought. Well, if I keep doing this, I'm probably going to get fired. But so it should be done right there. Yeah, I probably shouldn't call off work tomorrow because my boss already is unhappy with me for not showing up 6 days this month. So, but if you just keep thinking about it over and over and over again, this is when it becomes problematic. Yeah.
Oh yeah. The amount of worry worry it just saturates our society. Like I've had moments in my life where I would say it was like a crisis, right? People would say to me like, "Aren't you worried?" I'm like, "Worried? What's the point of that?" Like, I'm not saying I'm immune to fear or anything like that, but there's I certainly have created some distance between myself and worry. Like, what am I gonna worry for?
Right. It serves no purpose. It actually serves a horrible purpose, but we won't get into that tonight. But it's yeah, it is exactly the thing you don't want to ever do. It never does you any good.
Hmm.
Other than that, like I said, that momentary thing. Well, if I call off work, I might get fired. You don't then think about it the rest of the night. You say, yeah, that's a bad idea. I should not be calling off work 7 times in a month. That's it. It's just that brief, temporary. Well, what happens if I do this? Probably something not good. Better not do this. Then you're done with it. So that's how
Right.
it's momentarily beneficial, but to stick with it, there's where the problems come.
Yeah, I was gonna say when it's chronic, right? If you're chronically
Exactly.
worried, and it's not just a thing about you, it's not just your genes, it's a thing that you can take control of and stop. So to be avoided.
Precisely.
Shall we look
Which
at
leads
judgment?
us, that's the other biggie. Those are my two biggies. So yeah, judgment is the other one. And again, I'll couch this in these, with these terms: criticizing, complaining, blaming, shaming, gossiping. If anybody does these things, you'll notice when you feel critical, you don't feel good. Like, this soup doesn't have enough salt in it. It's terrible, or it's too salty, right? You don't feel good when you're complaining about
I
the
hate
salt,
this soup.
right? There's a bad feeling coming over you, right? You may not like it and you may not want to eat it. And if you're at a restaurant, you can send it back, but it's this complaining, criticizing, right? And usually people take it and they talk about it for the rest of the dinner. I just can't believe how salty the soup was. How could they do this to me? And then they get home and they post it on Facebook and they, next day they tell everybody at work how they had this extra salty soup at XYZ restaurant. And this is where the problem. And the whole time, by the way, they feel bad when they're doing this complaining and criticizing
Hmm.
and blaming and shaming. And the
And they
and the
think
same
it's because the soup, the person who made the soup made them feel bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, who knows what they attribute it to? But it's and of course, I'm just making up the silliest example. But the weather is the one I always pull up. I know some people that there's like 3 days a year where the weather's okay, right? And every other day, it's a little too hot, it's a little too cloudy, it's a little too cold, it's a little too breezy. It might rain in a few hours, and so there's always this imperfect weather for these people. And
Mhm.
once again, if you look at while you're in the act of criticizing and complaining, you don't feel good. It doesn't feel good. That's the
Mm.
key to getting out of it. Now, you may have to sit with a group of friends or family and listen to them complaining and criticizing, but your
Mhm.
ability to not participate, right, in that conversation, just watch or walk away or whatever you can do, is how you kind of break out of this, sick society behavior. That makes sense.
Yeah. Funny judgment thing that I get into is judging people who are judging. I'm like, look at these people judging each other. Don't they even
Yeah.
know? And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, what? Ugh.
Right. Right. And the craziest one of all, of course, is how much you judge yourself. Nothing worse than that.
And now, yeah, why am I judging people? Why am I judging people for judging people? Oh, I'm terrible.
Exactly. I was going to say that's a terrible thing to do, man. I can't believe I did that. That's so awful of me. Right? You could see how it just splits off and just becomes this insidious
Yeah,
behavior. And the
it'll
whole
take any
time,
form, right?
that's right. The whole time you feel terrible. It feels terrible to
Right,
judge yourself. Oh, I'm not smart enough. I'm not good looking enough. I'm not rich enough. I can't ever get this right. I'm never going to succeed. You just feel awful while you're doing it, which is your indicator that it's not a natural behavior.
right. It's good that you
Couldn't
mentioned
be
that
that
word
simple.
again. So, how about we just step back from those two and
Yep.
just look at that? How in the context of the core of the podcast here is like fear and judgment are normal, totally normal. Like if you could just be doing fear and judgment in front of people, they wouldn't even bat an eyelid.
That's right.
Totally, totally cool. Like we just do it back and forth to each other, right? I'll express my fears, you express yours, and then let's judge some people together. We'll just do it together. So let's all get together and have a big group and just do it. That'd be normal, but it's certainly not natural. Certainly not rational, and certainly doesn't lead you to happiness. Certainly
Correct
doesn't
and
feel good.
correct. That's right. It seems like it does though. The peer pressure, the herd mentality does make it seem that way.
Right.
It's funny too. Fear those two categories make a good conversation starter with a stranger too. Can you believe that what this happened? I can't. Can you believe that such and such and such? Right? And you can strike up a conversation with somebody so quickly. It seems like if you have this complaint or judgment or fear about something that you're both aware of.
Okay. Well, let
Interesting
me
how.
ask you this. We've got this fear and judgment. Let's see if we can
Mm.
step back to these known groups. Edward Bernays, Tavistock, Fabian Society, Frankfurt School, Columbia University, CIA, Royal Society, Belief Shapers. What do you think? What do you think's going on there? Like, are you suggesting that they're coming up with propaganda to put us into fear and judgment and
I
make that
think
normal?
one. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Oh, absolutely. But I think one of the main ways they do this is with a beloved character. Right? They love to, all great heroes in books, movies, TV, right? They have certain character flaws, and that's what makes them people be able to identify with the character. If someone's just perfect in every way, then they don't make a good hero, right? People can't identify with them because they think they're full of all these flaws. So they give these heroes in movies and books with certain flaws, and when people identify, that makes them identify. But those flaws are all revolve around these categories, right? What they're worried about, what they're scared about, what they're not good at. So that'll be the dominant theme of like a major hero. Make sense?
Yeah, sure.
And of course, these things are pointed out and turned into big articles and pieces and news pieces and so forth of just regular people, real life nonfiction people. Well, General Patton was an amazing strategist on the battlefield, but in his private life, fill in the blank, right? So
Hmm.
they'll take him down and knock him down a notch, and that's the type of thing that's done. It's all subtle, right? But that absolutely that they're doing this all the time, and again, it's slow, gradual, subtle. It isn't right in your face.
Right, right, right. Like every famous person in the media is always like always saying something bad about him, right? Whether it's the left media or the right media. Like someone on for every famous person. Well, okay, not every famous person, but a lot of famous people. A lot of the controversial ones. There's a lot of media attention talking about how they're bad in this way, bad in that way.
That's right. That's news
Just
that sells.
spreading judgment, right?
Right. That's news that sells because of all the brainwashing and propaganda into this is normal. So now
Right.
the sensationalist, outlets make the biggest money, sell the
Mhm.
most copies, have the most viewers and subscribers. That's right. It's
Well,
not
we're kind of
because it's,
touching on. Go ahead, bro.
I was just going to say, it's not because it's natural that we want to hear this, but it seems to be very normal that we want these
Right.
things. And, one of the only ways, if what I'm saying doesn't make sense, you have to start to step out of this a little bit, and then it'll start to become more obvious to you as you start to look around you and think about it. Is it normal? Is it normal to do things that make me feel bad? And just think about that one question, and that'll lead you in the right direction. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying we're starting to touch on entertainment, modern TV, movies, music.
Yeah, I mean,
Music is really endowed with judgment these days, isn't it?
I haven't been able to listen to anything in a long time in terms of modern music. Yeah, I mean, it's the lyrics are. I mean, you probably don't remember this. Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore, for whatever reason took on this mission to get like rock stars albums labeled, like adult only lyrics or whatever, violent
Hmm.
lyrics. This was back in the in the 90s, I think. And I mean, what they were, what XYZ rock star said back in those days doesn't even hold a candle to what is on the radio today. Like a lot of those songs were banned for like normal airplay in the 1980s and 1990s, right? They would
Hmm.
just ban a song for, some slightly racy or violent or sexual lyrics. And that stuff is just front and center today. I mean, you can walk into a department stores today and hear that music playing. So
Hmm.
and that's I'm only talking 20, 30 years of a shift. So you can see, and even, TV and movies, I can think back to, the kind of the late 90s when, uh, mid 90s when Howard Stern hit the airwaves and South Park hit the TV, Comedy Central. I mean, those were the most controversial things of all time. And today it's just passes for absolutely, completely allowable and normal. Whether you agree with the morality of it or not isn't the point. The point is that it was unacceptable to the society at large 30 years ago. And today it passes as acceptable.
Hmm.
I won't even bother going back another 30 years to the, the 1950s or whatever, where, so many programs like Seinfeld would have been like the most racy show ever conceived of. Never would have been able to play in the 1950s.
Oh, I'll tell you what's more racy than Seinfeld is The Nanny.
Okay, the nanny. Yeah, I mean, a
It's
lot
like,
of these.
whoa, gee, that was, man, kids watch this. Oh, gee, they just say that?
Right. It was a lot of innuendo in those, right? But it
So
wasn't
much innuendo.
explicit. But now it's just explicit, right? I
It's
mean, I haven't
explicit,
watched
right?
television in 15 years, but it seems to me nowadays they just come right out and say it. It's just a good example of
Right.
how things have gone downhill from we'll say a morality perspective. But yeah, it's
And
there. Go ahead.
it becomes normal. That's the
That's right.
point here. It's like it's so everywhere. It's like, well, what's music like? It's like that. That's what music is. That's
Right.
normal.
Children and
That's typical.
teenagers are mimickers, right? So they mimic what they see and hear.
Right.
There was a great show that I don't think it lasted very long. I think it was on Fox, and I'm not even going to guess the years. It was probably the late '90s, early 2000s. And it was about the the plot of the story was about this little boy whose mom left him or whatever with somebody, and they didn't want to like take care of the kid, so they put him like in a playpen and just sat a TV in front of him. And he all he did was watch TV until he became an adult, basically. And so he learned how to like be conniving and cheat everybody, and right, he thought that was normal human behavior. Anyway, it
Hmm.
was a good plot. For whatever reason, I don't think the series worked, but it was pointing to what I'm suggesting is that we learn our behaviors from what we see on TV and the movies and listen to the music. That's what teaches us what's
Well,
okay
let
and
me give a
correct.
great example. Um, I was just watching Curb Your Enthusiasm, and Bruce Springsteen was in it, so Bruce Springsteen's on my mind. It was funny in the show they said, "Oh, does this person like Bruce Springsteen?" And they went, "Of course, who doesn't like Bruce Springsteen?" Right? So Bruce Springsteen, right? They just make that point. It's really popular, right? Everyone loves Bruce Springsteen. I love Bruce Springsteen, but Bruce Springsteen, he's like, "Well, climate change, blah blah blah," and he's like, "COVID, blah blah blah," like, and he's just like thrust into the media spotlight. It's like, here's a clip on CNN of Bruce Springsteen saying these things about climate change and COVID, right? It's like,
Right?
see, normal, yeah. You like that guy? He says that, and look, yeah, he's really good.
Exactly.
It's just crazy how this unnatural stuff is just injected into society just by you take someone whom we love and like and just put them front and center saying unnatural beliefs, and we'll be like, yeah, right on.
That's right. And it's and the people who do toe the line like that, right? The celebrities, politicians, right? They don't get smeared in the media, right? They're
Right.
hands off. If you
Yeah.
go along with the Royal Society, Tavistock Institute, Marxist agenda, then it seems like you're squeaky clean. I can think of a
Right. It's the
former
party.
president of ours that toes that line. Name will not be mentioned, but yeah, the more you go along with that, the more you're laid off of. So anyway, the
It's
guys,
interesting how in like the Soviet Union, or I suppose Germany, not that I'm too familiar there. No, I'm sure it is certainly how I'm going to say, like, there'd be the party, right? That like they would specifically refer to the party, right? And you'd be in the party or out of the party or against the party or with the party. Nowadays, we don't really have the party, right? We don't call this big group the party, all the institutions, the government, all the people who are involved in that. It's just unwritten, unspoken. But there really is like the party.
that's right. Yeah, Joe Rogan has just started to break from the herd recently, and
Right. He was in the party.
he was absolutely in the party, as was almost everybody, right?
All right.
There are very few that weren't in the party, and he's one of the first to start to make his break, and he's starting to give a few of his guests a slightly hard time. He still thinks he was in the right, and that the party went sideways only recently, so they don't recognize that it's been happening all along yet. But yeah, there's the cool hip group, which is the next bullet, right there, and that's it. That's the party. And
Mhm.
there's a certain apparently unconscious drive to want to be a part of that popular hip group. Certainly don't want to be in the outsider group,
Mhm.
and that's part of it. And it pays to play ball with the party. It does pay socially, financially, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah,
But
yeah,
not
yeah, yeah, yeah.
spiritually.
Not spiritually. Yeah.
It's not good for the soul.
Not even close.
You can acquire material possessions much more easily if you align yourself with the party.
100%. In fact, it can be extremely difficult to even get the bare necessities the more you don't align with the party. No question about it.
Okay. So we've got politics here.
And we've kind of been
We've
poking
got
at that
this.
a little bit.
I'll just read these things we got here.
Hmm?
There are leaders, and they run things, and I vote for the one I don't. Oh yeah, this is the norms. in politics, right? So listen to how normal this isn't like normal behavior in politics, all right? Okay, here's politics. There are leaders, right? Leader of this party, leader of that party, right? They run things. Okay, leaders of the country, they run the country. That's what's happening. And yeah, I like that one. And no, I don't like that one. And I vote. Right, I vote for that one. That's just normal behavior to just to take that reality literally and be like, yep, that's what it is. That's normal. They run the country. They're in power. I vote for them. It's funny how normal that sounds. Just
Yeah.
it's like you're born into it. You're sure it's normal. It is normal. But is that natural to go around voting for leaders and be like, yeah, that's my leader. They
It's
make
as
me
it's
vote for one of them. I like
right.
that leader.
It's as far from natural as you can get. It literally breaks one universal law after another. That
Right.
mentality. But it's a great
Is
point.
there some specific universal law that we even covered to do with like, is there some like thou shalt hath no leader or something
What?
like that?
Well, anytime you try to bend somebody's will towards what benefits you,
Mm-hmm.
you're creating massive karma for yourself. When you
Ugh,
know
that
that
just
it's
sounds
not in their best
terrible.
interest. Yeah, when you know it's not in their
Ugh.
best interest. Yeah,
Oh man,
right.
the way you
There's a
put it,
certain
that was good.
there's a certain allowance for a parent raising a child. Don't get me wrong, right? Like you have to
Mm-hmm.
teach the child how to
Right.
live and not, stick their finger in a socket. And, once it's adult on adult, the idea that there are leaders and followers breaks just innumerable universal laws. For that reason
Mm-hmm.
alone, is that you're trying to twist somebody to benefit you in some way. That's right.
I got
So
another one
it's
here.
hit me.
You want to say that first, bud?
Do I want to say it? I watch the media talk about politics and pretend it's important to my life.
Yeah, right. Isn't that normal? You like
Yeah.
switch on the news and watch
Right.
those anchors with their fake voices and they tell you about politics. And you're like, yes, this is a valuable activity. I do this. That's so absurd.
Right. And what's amazing is if you watch the left leaning channels, it's always they're always saying all 100% great things. And the right leaning people they point out always say something terrible. Right. And when you turn on the right leaning station, it's the reverse.
Yep.
No propaganda. They're not trying to shape your beliefs in any way, though. Right.
Yeah, they're certainly not trying to play you off against each other. There's no way, right? I'm
Not a
sure that
chance.
it's that they're like it's funny how both teams think that they're right. It's like you understand that you can't both be right, yeah.
That's pretty brutal,
But
man.
that's the thing, right? They get you worrying about whether this thing's right or true or false or whatever. But the smuggled in thing is the fear and judgment.
That's right. Nicely put. Smuggled in. Yeah. In the back door. Got it.
Ooh, here's a juicy one. Health.
Yeah.
Tell us about what's normal in health, Brad.
Well, normal health is perfect health. Well, natural. Your
Mm,
natural state is perfect health, right?
state is perfect
Yeah.
health.
Right.
Normal.
The norm
What's the
is
normal?
that yeah, norm is most people over the age of 30 I think it's over people over the age of 30 are taking at least one prescription medication. Over the age of 40, it's two. Over the age of 50, I think it's four now. Over the age of 60, it's five. Over the age of 60, or over the age of 70, I think it's seven. And over the age of 80, I think it's 8 to 10. So the normal thing is that the older you get, the sicker you get, and the more drugs you need to stay healthy. That's what's normal, at least here in America. And yet you can go out and find perfectly healthy 80-year-olds. I mean, they're older. They can't, run 100 meters in 10 seconds or, whatever, pole vault, but they're generally speaking, they're in good health. They're out there.
Right. My ballet coach in Russia showed me this 83 or 85-year-old male ballet teacher. Never seen someone move that well
Right?
at 80. Incredible. And my perspective on that is that is natural. Everyone can be like that. 100%. Okay,
Yeah.
with some exceptions, okay? Like But for a regular person, that is within their potential to move
That's
that
right.
well when they're 80. But it's like,
Yeah.
oh no, the normal, like I help a lot of people like get mobility and resolve like physical pain in their body, and a lot of people are older, but I'm up against this massive belief system that it's like, well, I'm old now, like it's like, oh, please
Right.
back off that, like that's not helping anyone, so least of all you.
That's right. It's the probably the best example of how this works against you. And it is all that fear and judgment that lead to all the ailments and diseases, as Dr. Hammer very clearly showed us. Whether he's 100% right or 90% right or 50% right, he's got a lot of it right. And you can look right at his causes for disease and you can tie it all back to fear and judgment,
Hmm.
unnatural behaviors. Incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, like deep chronic fears that just like undertone the current of your life and just saturate your life, just ever-present fears that are just ripping you apart from the inside.
Right. And some people feel it's sad but true, but some people feel, right, that it's unfamiliar to not be having fears, right? Like that feels weird to them. So they'll go find a new
Hmm.
one, something new to be scared about, like 5G towers,
I was going to say
chemtrails.
5G. What a
Yeah, right.
perfect candidate, right? Hey, everybody. I just found something so good to be afraid of. We can be
Yeah,
mega afraid of this. It's called 5G. That's going
right.
to occupy us for years.
It could be everywhere. You don't even know where when you're around it or not. Maybe, right?
Right.
That's right. It's a biggie.
Okay. Well, we've discussed oh, you might want to mention this last thing where we've put notice, right? It's probably yours to mention, Brad.
Oh, did I? Maybe I put that in there. Yeah.
Below
Well,
health.
yeah. No, let's skip that. I don't like it.
You want
I'm
to
not
skip
sure what
that?
I was. Yeah, I'm not sure what I was thinking. Let's keep going. Jump ahead.
Oh, okay, so now we arrive at the core point. The core point. The thing we're driving to. Why don't you push that out, Brad?
This is it. I think we've kind of already said it, but we'll say it in more with more clarity here. If you continue to act like what society deems as normal, you're going to continue to have the same problems or potentially worse problems that you've had your whole life. Right. And I speak to suffering and pain and unfortunate scenarios, uncomfortable situations are going to continue to persist in your life. That's what normal societal behavior brings you. Can it be any clearer than that?
I don't think so.
And the reason, right, if you look at it deeply enough, is that you're putting out the energy. This is the universal law, the law of the circle, right? You're putting out these bad feeling energies, right? You feel bad when you're doing these judgment, fear behaviors, right? You feel bad. So because you put bad feelings out into the universe, right? The universal law has to return it to its creator. So it comes back to you as bad situations, bad events, bad feelings, sicknesses, diseases, on and on and on. So it's just a return energy of what you were putting out with your fear and judgment. Yeah.
Hmm. It seems like the core formula is for these belief shapers and the propaganda outlets that we mentioned before is to make you an offer to deceive yourself into fear and judgment. And then you do that. And then you put out these energies and they come back and you get hurt.
Yep.
There's just
That's
that constant offer available to you all the time.
right. All of their institutional offerings, right, are designed to put you into that place of quote normal behavior, which basically prematurely kills you, right? If you believe what some of the channels say, and I tend to believe them, they say our body's supposed to function perfectly normally for 120 years. Whether that's true or not,
Hmm.
I'm not going to say whether it is or it isn't. But you do see some people get to about that age, right? Some of these Okinawan Japanese women, right, that kind of live completely removed from society, right, and they kind of have this lifestyle that they've developed over the millennia there in Japan, and You know, you'll see women 117, 118, 119. I don't know why the women last longer than the men, but they get up there and they like take care of themselves too, right? They aren't in a nursing home or they don't need any medication. And it's like, what's going on with those women that's not going on in the rest of the world? Right? People think it's
Hmm.
their diet, you know, the food, or they're getting
Oh yeah.
certain levels of calcium and they eat kelp and this is the secret. But it's not the secret. They haven't they haven't been exposed to this propaganda and brainwashing that most of the people of the world have been exposed to. That's my gut hunch. What do you think?
Well, yeah, pretty much
They're
that, right?
living naturally.
Hmm. It's funny how
Anyway,
like natural is kind of the default, and then you get this introduction of these offerings, and they corrupt and become normal.
that's right. You're bringing and you're pointing out that everything out there, everything is an offer, right? Offer and acceptance. The TV is an offer. The movies are an offer. The music's an offer. Popular groups an offer. And the question is whether you accept it or not. And that's how the world works. Fascinating.
So, what is natural?
Yeah, you asked me that, and the first thought that came to my mind, and I've been using this a lot, is like dance like nobody's watching. Right? You get the gist of what that means, right? It's like you stop caring about what everybody else thinks about what you're saying or doing. Right? You're not being mean or hurting people, but how much of our authentic self do we hide, suppress, and hold back just to be accepted into the in group, right? To feel popular, and this is ultimately that suppression of your, you know, kind of your true, authentic desire or what you want to do or say. It's pushed down, and that adds to the you know anger and repressed feelings in the body, which also lead to disease. By the way, what do you think of that idea? Make sense?
Hmm. Yeah, and you've got some other ways of putting it here: following your bliss, doing what you
Yeah.
love, having fun.
Yeah, that's the follow your bliss. Is that, you know, Joseph? A lot of people have heard of Joseph Campbell. He was wrote the hero's journey, and he was an amazing, you know, anthropologist slash archaeologist. You know, he just basically went around the world for 60, 70 odd years and just studied all these, you know, kind of obscure cultures and their mythologies and their lores. And he was asked, you know, like, can you sum up all your 70 years of research? You know, how would you sum it all up? You know, what advice would you give people? And he said, follow your bliss. 3 words. I love that. Pretty good stuff. But that's it. We somehow or another we get talked out of following our bliss. You know, you turn 15 and you want to be an artist, and your parents convince you that you're not going to make any money and you're better off becoming a lawyer, or you know whatever, and you follow their advice, and you know 10 years later you're sitting in that office and you know you wish you would have maybe become an artist. That's kind of the idea there, right? Somehow or another it gets broken in us, you know, somewhere in our schooling. Usually we get talked out of it. Make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the Led Zeppelin song 10 Years Gone, Robert Plant,
Yeah,
his
yeah,
girlfriend
yeah.
told him, well, you know, it's either me or this band. And he's like, I'll follow my bliss.
There you go. Now obviously it paid off for him, right? At least for 20 odd years, 30 years, you
Hmm.
know, singing.
Okay,
Good
so
one.
let me give you a tough question. So you say, I say, what is natural? And you say, well, it's dance like nobody's watching. It's follow your bliss. Okay. What if I said to you, okay, well, how do we know that that's not just your opinion? How do we know that that's like, why should we believe or why should we agree that that's true?
Well, because it feels good to you. No, notice I didn't say what you should do to have fun
Hmm.
or do what you love or
Hmm.
follow your bliss. Like I didn't say
Hmm.
becoming an artist is how you follow your bliss. I didn't say that. I'm saying it's something that you feel makes you feel good.
Hmm.
Right? I love it when I put my hairbrush up to my mouth and sing in the mirror. I love it when I get to get my doodle pad and scratch. I love it to get a little piece of wood and whittle it down into a, you know, whatever, a matchbox car, whatever. Right? Who knows what it is? It's different for everybody, right? But that's you how you know it because it feels good to you.
Hmm.
That's the simple answer. Yeah, you with me?
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Great.
We have written down feeling is automatic feedback of what's natural and good.
That's it. And it's also automatic feedback of what's unnatural and not good.
So we have a thing here. It's written distinguishing unnatural from natural. And you could say, well, you can distinguish unnatural from natural by one feels good and one feels bad.
There it is. It's kind of
So,
redundant.
but do you think you could elaborate? Because some people might be like, I don't know, like, does this feel good, or like, how would you just add more to that to help to enhance people's perception of what feels good and feels bad?
Well, it's important to note that, like, drinking and taking drugs and things has a temporary. That's not. That wouldn't be the right answer. And we're not talking about this momentary pleasure type of thing, right? That's
Mhm.
actually an
Mhm.
avoidance strategy, right? And the avoidance,
Right.
right, with drugs and alcohol is to get out of the monkey mind, the thoughts, right? That's what the beauty of those things is. It knocks that out, so you can kind of
Mhm.
become present, at least for a short period of time until it becomes a bad habit and addiction. But it's really just you thinking. Here's the question I always tell people: like, if you could make $1 million a year, and for those of you who make more than that, make it a billion. It doesn't matter. You get the point. If you could make $1 million a year doing anything that you wanted to in this world, right? Not and anything doesn't mean laying on the couch playing video games, or like you have to contribute something to society, right? Whatever it is, whether it's your drawings or your music or your ability to play a sport or whatever. But if you could make $1 million at whatever you wanted to do, what would you do? That's the question. And whatever your answer is, that's the thing you love. Make sense?
Mhm.
And
Sure
and
does.
you, yeah, you'd make the same amount of money being an investment banker or a merger and acquisition expert on Wall Street, right? Whatever you think the richest guys make, if you could make that making pottery, then if you love making pottery, that's the thing you love. And it's okay. By the way, it's okay to love something today and change your mind tomorrow. That's not like, okay, I've decided that making pottery is going to be what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. That might feel a little uncomfortable, right? But right now, in this moment, making pottery sounds like the most exciting thing in the world to me. It's the thing I'm most enthusiastic about. So that's the answer to the following your bliss and having fun. It doesn't mean planning out a 50-year career. It means right now, this is what I feel like. This is what feels fun to me. And that's what you do.
Beautiful. We have some concluding pieces of advice. These are mostly yours, Brad. Why don't you throw these down?
Yeah. So, this is the hard part. So, and I don't, I may not be able to articulate this well, but there's that, I'm talking to a lot of people right now who find themselves in these situations. They're starting to see, right? They're starting to see what their, social group or certain family members or whatever are, behaving with these normal behaviors that are unnatural, and they don't know quite what to do. And excuse me, there's no one size fits all answer. One idea is to just not participate in the complaining, criticizing, blaming, judging, fearing, worrying session that you might find yourself in, right? Just listen and don't judge them for doing that, right? You're actually creating a little karma for yourself if you judge them, but just kind of let them ramble on, and just maybe it'll die out if you don't add fuel to the fire. That's one idea. Another idea is you can step away, find something else. I got to run to the bathroom real quick, or, oh, I forgot I got to call so and so, kind of break up the conversation or the moment. Or another idea is to change the subject. Hey, you know what? By the way, I meant to ask you about blah, blah, blah. Whatever the strategies are, the idea is to not participate in it, but still maintain your relationships, right? Because they are
Mhm.
maintainable. There is a basis of love and friendship and value in it. So it's just a breaking away from this criticizing, complaining, worrying, judging, gossiping stuff that seems so prevalent in society today. So somebody's got to break it up, right? And what I'm suggesting to people is you be the friend, you be the person in your friend group that, starts to throw some short circuit some of this behavior that seems normal to everybody. Yeah? That making a little
So
bit of
you don't
sense?
necessarily have to go, guys, you know what you're doing? It's just wrong and stupid and you shouldn't do it. Like there's other strategies. to
Exactly.
short
Yeah.
circuit it and just sidestep it, you know.
That's right. Yeah, you're not going to be able to. You're certainly not going to be able to point it out, and you would never want to point it out in the moment. That would be a mistake as well. It'd be if you did want to point it out to them and you felt that friend was receptive. It would be a separate time and a separate conversation. You'd say, "Hey, you know what, Frank? I learned this thing and I've been practicing it a little bit, and life's going a little bit better for me." And see if Frank's interested in hearing about it, right? And you
Right.
can lay it on him at that point and see what not to point out, Frank, last Tuesday you were moaning and groaning and whining about this and that, and boy, you really made a spectacle and you were really doing all the wrong things. That's never the right strategy, is it? So
Right.
yeah,
And whenever you're leading people in this direction, it's always, you can always, if you tune in, you can get a sense for what they're ready for and what they're not ready for. And
yeah,
so you
it's
want
not
to kind of
complicated.
just give them what it seems like they're ready for.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I'll just say that you'll be surprised if you let's everyone can kind of think of that friend or family member that seems to always be complaining or criticizing or whatever. You'd be surprised when you engage with them and they go into that and you don't engage with it, you don't fuel it up more. You'd be surprised how quickly they'll let it go, right? Without
Mm,
you telling them to let it go. Just kind of like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. You know what I mean? That kind of a thing.
hmm.
They're they're in a way they're doing it because they think you like it.
Right.
And when you let on that you don't like it anymore, they change right along with you. It's kind of magical.
What about this one here? Do it at the pace you can accept.
Yeah, so that's just my point that don't try to fix everything all at once and everybody and try to make yourself, there's nothing worse than saying, okay, I'm never going to complain and criticize and judge and blame anymore. That's not going to, if that's a common behavior in your life, you're not going to fix it all at once, right?
Hmm.
You just look for opportunities. And by all means, when you slip into it, don't judge yourself for, forgetting that you shouldn't have been complaining about this, that, or the other, right? So it's not all right, I've got to completely eliminate this from my life starting tomorrow morning. Just doesn't work that way, right? You're breaking out of, a bad habit that's been around for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years. Yeah.
Right.
That's the point of that. Go easy on yourself as you start to see this and move away from it over time.
Well, I'm excited about this next one.
Yeah, I don't even know what I was going to say there. Do you remember what I was
I
going
don't
to
know
say?
either. Well, you better say something.
Well, I maybe what I'll say is, I know what I wanted to say here. Yeah, so this is Saint Germain, the guy who channels him that I was very influential in my life. But he told me, he told us, a group of us in 2013, that we shouldn't watch movies anymore. And this barrage of questions that followed that was one of the most hilarious sessions we ever had. Because one person after another would say, "What about this movie? What about that? What about this movie?" And eventually, he just had to cut us all off and say that, you know, what's what's in these movies that you're not seeing is that they're they're teaching you how to behave in ways that don't benefit you in the long run. So even though there's no sex or violence or language or whatever in it, right? It's the behaviors that you're learning from them that are subtly teaching you what's okay and what's normal. That's the real problem. And the reason I share this is because I couldn't stop watching movies for a good 5, 6 years even after he told us to turn them all off. So it's the first time you hear it, it's hard to accept. Is what's my point here? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, Ayn Rand said that art, like, and like movies and music have really gone in a way that they're conveying this sense of life that's anti-life essential.
Yeah.
And she even wrote a non-fiction series, or they put together a non-fiction series called The Romantic Manifesto, and it's about
Mhm.
it's like it's a manifesto urging artists to create what art that empowers people and displays rational living, right?
Yeah. 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 Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly right. It isn't normal. It seems weird, but yet there it is coming from a wise philosopher of the 20th century. One of the wisest, right?
Absolutely. Just ask me, I'll tell you.
We got it coming from the metaphysical, the spiritual, the philosophers. They're all telling us the same thing,
Right.
and they're all telling us it's going to benefit us. And even after all of that, we still have a hard time with it. We still
Right.
have that herd mentality and don't want to upset people and want to play along and want to do the things that everyone's normally doing. So it's a it's a tough challenge in the beginning. I'm not gonna make it seem like it isn't. It's not easy. It's simple, but not easy.
Rightio.
Yeah, yeah. I think
So,
we
our
nailed it.
course, I want to mention Take Your Power Back at this point because
Mm-hmm.
I would say this podcast that we've done right here is more aligned with Take Your Power Back than any other podcast we've done. Like, Take Your Power Back is about the transition from unnatural, anti life, self harming behaviors to natural, positive, joyful bliss oriented living. That's what it's
Exactly.
about.
That's right. I've got a few modules. They're actually going to be new modules here, but when I as we're recording this, but they may be already there when by the time someone orders it. But I'm going to talk about power drains and fear and judgment at the top of the list of what drains your power.
Right.
So we'll focus more deeply and heavily on that in the course, of course.
Yep. You'll find it
Yep.
on the mindblownzone.com.
Yes, indeed. Worth
Well, that
every
was a good
penny.
one, Brad.
It was. I felt like I didn't know if I was going to be able to get it out in a way that felt good, but I feel pretty good about it. How it flowed and how we finished. Hopefully, a few people will be able to hear this and start to incorporate it in their life and see if it makes a difference, which I
Right.
know it will.
And we'd love to hear your comments. So, whichever social media platform you're on, or if you're on our website, just go ahead, post your thoughts, let us know what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. Look forward to that. Perfect. Awesome. All right. Well,
Awesome
thanks
indeed.
everybody. Thanks, Matt. Great questions, great pointers as usual. And thanks everybody for listening. And we look forward to your feedback here, as Matt said, and catching up with you next week with our next podcast.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.